Welcome to RPV City Talk. RPV City Talk is brought to you by the City of Rancho Palos Verdes to inform the community on recent city matters. RPV City Talk is a weekly show that features the RPV mayor, city council, or city employees.
Thanks so much for joining us. Today we introduce you to one of the newest members of our city council. Jerry Duhovic was born in San Pedro but lived all across the country before finding his way back to the peninsula. Jerry, residents know you pretty much as the young guy who just got elected to city council, but we want to kind of go through your life and talk about who you are and your journey, because it's been an interesting one. You started out in San Pedro,
right?
But you've moved kind of all over the place. I want to talk about that. You lived in Portland, Hawaii, Walnut Creek. Talk about where you started and how you kind of got to each place.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. I was born in San Pedro. Don't remember moving to Portland. I do remember playing in the snow. My younger sister was born up in Portland.
Okay.
Memory starts coming into play about 1969. I remember my mother sitting me in front of the TV saying, "You need to watch this," and that's when we landed on the moon. We were in Hilo, Hawaii.
Wow.
A couple years in Hilo, then ultimately moved to Honolulu for 2 years. 1973 moved to Walnut Creek, and back in 1975 moved back down to what is now Rancho Palos Verdes. It was San Pedro, Rancho Palos Verdes, but my family's been in that house for about 37 years now.
Now, what did your dad do for a living?
My father was an executive with Genesco and SH Kress, and he was the Western District Manager, so what they like to do is move them around every couple of years, so we had the benefit of doing that. It was interesting childhood, had a lot of fun. But
I was going to ask you, did you like moving around? I know you have 3 sisters.
I do.
And did they enjoy that?
We did. We
Okay.
got very close as kids, but you know, we settled back down here in RPV when I was in 5th grade. So you know, 5th grade forward, this is pretty much where my roots are.
Where you know, yeah.
Exactly.
Now, growing up with 3 sisters, 2 older and 1 younger.
1 older and 2 younger.
2 younger. Okay.
Right.
And what was it like being the only boy? I'm the only girl with 3 older brothers. So what was the opposite dynamic like?
Well, it was interesting. I guess I'd like to say I'm a little more sensitive to women because of that, you know, and I've got 2 daughters and my wife, and our animals were all female, so it was good, you know. It would have been different having a brother, but you know, I was always the big brother, even to my older sister, and you know, we were very close growing up. It was good.
Yeah. Now, when you came back, you went to Mary Star.
I did.
Let's talk about that. I know that you played football at Mary Star.
Right.
What was that like?
Well, you know, I chose Mary Star. There was a coach that had been around there a long time, Joe Radisich, and he had a penchant for getting players into Division I schools, and that was one of the primary reasons, other than the Catholic education. He was a great coach, and I went there, and he actually was very well connected with the collegiate coaches, and I guess, you know, through my play and through his connections, I got 4 or 5 scholarship offers, so it kind of worked out.
Okay, talking about that, it's interesting because, you know, there's so many kids that want to play football, and some of the parents think, well, I don't want them to get hurt, and what do they really get out of it? But I think for people that play and that have experienced it, you get life out of it. It's such a learning experience. Talk about that.
Not only that, the camaraderie and the, you know, I still, you know, keep in touch with teammates of mine from high school. I may not see them for 15 or 20 years, and you talk, it's like you haven't missed a beat.
Exactly.
It's just almost similar to the military. You're just really, you're a unit, and you work together, and you've gone through hardships and victories and sadness, etc. So it's there's a bond that's there. I really believe team sports do add a lot to a child's development.
They certainly do. Now, after that, you went to the Air Force Academy.
That's correct.
In Colorado Springs and played football. That is such a prestigious opportunity, I think, for anyone. I think that we always think of either, you know, college football or, you know, Army, Navy, Air Force, or the pros. So that was an extremely prestigious place to go. What was that like?
You know, that was probably one of the best experiences of my life. It was very difficult the first year, actually. I was, at the time, probably the largest cadet they ever let into the Air Force Academy. I think I went in there about 290.
Okay.
And so I stood out. There was a lot of smaller people there.
What position did you play?
I played defensive tackle, and unfortunately, towards the end of my freshman year, I had a severe ankle injury that precluded me from being, you know, much help to the team going forward. But, you know, it was still part of the team most of my time there, and after surgery number 4, they basically said, "Son, you need to concentrate on being an officer and think about that. You're not going to be a professional player, so that's what I did.
What's it like from a perspective of the fan support and I mean, it must have been amazing.
The fan support is excellent. You know, the academy, we were the youngest of the academies, but we had a good run. We were, you know, the 4 years I was at the academy, we beat Notre Dame all 4 years.
Wow.
At that point in time, we were only the second team in history to do that, SC from the 30s and Air Force in the 80s. And in 1985, if we would have beat BYU on the last game of the year, we would have played Penn State for the national championship in the Fiesta Bowl. And the team wound up number 5 in the country that year. So that's pretty good for an academy because we, you know, they're limited onto size that you can recruit, et cetera.
They sure are, yeah, that's amazing. Now, RPV, very different, Colorado Springs. What was that experience like? Did you like it there?
I loved it. Actually, you know, Colorado Springs is gorgeous, and what's interesting is I lived on the East Coast too. It was cold in Colorado, but the sky was blue most of the time.
Right.
East Coast is a little different. It would be cold, and you'd have that high 40,000 foot gray, and that made it a little different perspective. But I actually love Colorado. I've still got several good friends there, and winters can get a little brutal, though.
Yeah, just a little. I know you're coming up on your 25th anniversary.
That's right, this year. Absolutely. We'll be back there in September, October. They haven't set the official date yet, but that's coming up, and bring the whole family out and get to see people I haven't seen for a number of years, but that'll be great.
You know, interesting. I want to talk about how you met your wife, because you actually met her when you were about 11 years old.
I was 10, she was 11.
Okay, talk about this.
Well, my wife was quasi-cousins, if you will. Her family was very tight with the family of my best friend in 5th grade, and she used to come over to their house all the time, and we'd go swimming and everything, and I always had a soft spot for her, and back then she didn't give me the time of day.
Of course not.
Even all the way through high school, she's a handful of months older than me, but my senior year, I wanted to invite her to the prom, and I went ahead and reached out to her, and she said yes. So that was really our first time spending a little time together as a couple, if you will.
Okay.
And a couple of weeks later, went to grad night at Disneyland, and then 2 weeks later I went to the Air Force Academy, and she ultimately moved back to New York. So
now, did you stay in touch in between times?
we did not.
Okay, so how did you get back together?
Interestingly enough, 1993, she came out with her mother, had some legal issues she was addressing, and I'll never forget, Cinco de Mayo, she happened to be down there with these best friends of mine down at Acapulco in San Pedro. And I saw her, and you know, some sparks flew again, and I never lost that I guess love for her, you know. And we talked, and that next 2 weeks she was in town. We wound up actually driving around mostly RPV, hitting all the view spots, and just talking for hours upon hours.
Wow.
Eating beef jerky and all kinds of stupid little things. But she was living in New York at the time, and when she was leaving, I actually went and bought her a ticket to Boston. An academy buddy of mine was getting married on Cape Cod, and I wrote her a little letter and bought her a ticket to Boston and put some money in for cab fare to and from the airport, and said, hey, you know, you want to join me in Boston, please do, and if you don't, just use the ticket for something else. And she checked in with her mother, and her mother said, you know, Jerry's a good guy, and gave her the blessing to go to Boston, you know. And,
so she took you up on your offer?
She did, and we went to Boston, and interestingly enough, that weekend was the final episode of Cheers. So not only did we have the wedding out there,
wow.
Me, my wife, and several other friends went and really had a great. We were actually at Cheers the night on the final episode over there, so it was just a spectacular first weekend together as a couple, and you know, that was the start of everything.
That's kind of an amazing experience, to have an amazing weekend with someone you ended up marrying, and have that as well.
It was unbelievable. That was really, we look back and we laugh about all the silly things that went on, and just had a great time.
I think one thing that you and I had talked about I thought was great was you really had an opportunity to get to know each other. You traveled a lot. What were you doing for a business at that time?
At that time, I was the director of compliance and chief administrative officer of another large brokerage firm in Orange County, and we had 360 branches across the U.S. at the time, and we annually had to go inspect these things. So as the director, I got to pick and choose
where you wanted to go,
where I wanted to go, and when I wanted to go. So we spent about a year and a half jet setting across the country, and where I was going, I'd say, meet me here. We went to Memphis, Seattle, Dallas, Boston, just all the big cities. So we spent about a year traveling. It was great. It was a long distance cross country courtship, because she still lived in New York and I was out here, and but it was great. We did get a lot of that
Your
traveling.
Your wife is so warm, and I think it's that East Coast thing, I think. Because
My wife is the best. She's a doll.
She really is.
She is so welcoming, and so that, you know, everybody who meets her and knows her, even for a few minutes, that's the general consensus.
Yeah.
She's a doll. I'm very lucky.
No, when did you know that you were that she was it? Because you had so many times together.
You know, I think once we started traveling, and, you know, even that first weekend, there was just the sparks were flying, and, you know, we spent so much time on the phone together, and just, you know, you remember it's fun to fall in love in court.
Yeah.
We spend hours and hours together on the phone and just talking about everything, and that, you know, I think it was, you know, pretty early on after that first Cinco de Mayo that this is probably going to be it, if we can get it to work out logistically.
Yeah, well, you did manage to do that. That's
We
for
did.
sure. That's for sure.
Yeah.
All right, we're going to take a short break, and when
Okay.
we come back, we're going to continue our conversation. We'll
Great.
be right back.